Now 7 o'clock.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the weekly parenting show live tonight on Inspire 105.1 FM. Your host today is myself, Sister Naveed, and inshallah joining me today, we have a full house today, inshallah. Let's hope we bring some khair and barakah to tonight's show. Sister Fazilat, Sister Shabina and Sister Masarat. Assalamu alaikum to all three of you.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. How are you three? You okay?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Trudging along.
Good.
Yeah?
Can't wait for half term.
I bet you can't, Shabina. Especially with all the teaching and all the work that, alhamdulillah, you teachers have to put into your daily routines at schools. I'm sure it's not easy. Yeah. And thank you for joining tonight. I'm sure it's a school night. You've probably got lots of marking and organizing of your household and schoolwork to do. But yeah, so out there to the listeners, inshallah, feel free to contribute in tonight's show. You could contribute on 07779 481822. You can leave your comments. You can pose any questions. We will try to answer them to the best of our ability. And you can share your thoughts and ideas and any suggestions for any future shows, as I always add onto my introduction every single week, inshallah. Tonight's topic, it was a tricky one. Maybe it's a spin of words. Maybe it's a mixture of previous topics that we have done, Fazilat, Masara, Shabina, and it's bringing together many different elements. Maybe it's, something that stemmed into my mind or crept into my mind based on the certain events that have been occurring over the last week or so, ranging from local stuff that's happening, such as the funeral that took place yesterday of the young boy, and if I'm correct, there's been 2 young deaths in Luton. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for the families and consider them shaheed, inshallah. And Allah guide the youth and the future generations, inshallah. And also the worldwide news that are breaking and taking place, and the kind of uncomfort and unease that we can find ourselves in at times in terms of how we are, how we conduct ourselves, how we speak, how we behave, what we do. So the title that stemmed into my mind was Articulation of Speech and Behaviour. How do we articulate ourselves? Have we as parents ever thought about how I'm articulating myself, how I'm coming across, what I'm saying? Have I composed my thoughts before I've spoke? Have I composed my feelings? How am I thinking? How am I feeling? Am I just speaking without thinking, engaging? Do we have regrets later and thinking, gosh, I should have said it like this. Shouldn't have said that. Could have said that differently. Could have put that differently. And how much of this truly do we teach our youth and the children around us? I'm not going to pick anybody in particular, but alhamdulillah, we have a nice range of sisters here today, from young toddler kids, primary school stage, all the way to the adults, inshallah. So I'm hoping as parents to parents, inshallah, so nobody's an expert here, what are our thoughts when it comes to articulation of speech and behavior? How important is it? And how do we view this? And how did you feel about today's topic? Who wants to go first? Bismillah. Mashallah, everybody jumped in. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go Fasila. Oh, Shabina, go on then.
No, Shabina, go.
Go on, the host has told you to go.
It's okay, you can go. Okay, so for me, it was a different topic, and I think maybe I suppose any topic when we give it a name, we think, okay, that's a bit odd, or how are we going to discuss that? And then when you break it down, it makes more sense. So it is a play of words, I think. And I was checking the meaning of articulate, and see how it fits in with our radio show, for example. And so I just wanted to do that. So having or showing the ability to speak fluently and coherently. So the articulation of speech. That was the definition that I found. And I think if you want to apply it to this show, it's about how we present ourselves, my understanding anyway, that how do we present ourselves with our speech, with our behavior, with our manners, with our whole personality, really. And do we conduct ourselves well? You know how if you go into a work environment and there's certain not rules or regulations as such, but expectations of how you behave, like you behave professionally, isn't it? How you speak at home, you may not speak in the workplace. So you articulate yourself in that way, in that environment. So the same way, I'd say that Allah has expectations of us, of how we conduct ourselves in this dunya. That's how I see it, as a bigger scheme of things.
Yeah, good opening. Thank you very much. Yeah, exactly that. Our conduct, how are we? And you're right, whenever we go into particular environments and atmospheres, there are rules and regulations. You can use that word. There's certain methods of speech, certain language that may be allowed or not allowed. And there are formal and informal environments. And even within the informal, Fazilat, if you want to go further, you may behave or speak slightly differently when you're around your friends to the way that you are around your parents or your siblings or your children. So even within informal settings, there's various settings. And there should always be a bank of information behind us about how we conduct ourselves within these different settings and environments. So if I just stick with you for a bit, Fazilat, how much of this would you say you have formally taught your kids in the past, or is it something that come to your mind now, or do you think you've been doing it subconsciously?
I think inshallah, I hope so. I think
what do you know of? Let's generalize it. Let's take it away from you.
No, I think I've done it subconsciously, because you always try to instill that in your children, isn't it? But I've done it consciously, if you like, when incidents have occurred or circumstances have arisen in our children's lives. For example, I don't know, something might happen at school, how they've behaved there, or their interactions with teachers, or how I've interacted with people, and I've had to, pull them up and say, that's not how we conduct ourselves. And I always say that you don't do it for my sake or because I'm saying. I said, because you represent Allah's deen. So when you go out there and how you behave, what you give is an image of, that's how all Muslims behave, or that's what Islam is. So I've tried to, inshallah, I think, and yes, sometimes it's explicitly, I've had to say that this is how we speak, or this is how we behave, or you have to look at your environment. And it could be, like you said, it could be amongst relatives, how we conduct ourselves with, certain relationships. We can't be, the relationship you might have with a sibling, you might not have with an uncle, and or with a grandparent, or with a distant, cousin, for example. So it's all different. And I think sometimes, and I've seen it with my own, for example, when we get too comfortable, we forget the boundaries of how we are supposed to be. So they might think, for example, like mine are some of them are quite similar ages to their uncles. There's not much difference. When they get to this age, there's not much difference as such. And they think, we can be quite free and joke around, and which might be fine with friends. But then there comes a time when that relationship kicks in and think, no, you can't. There's an element of respect, or there's that line that you don't cross with elders, or, and for me, then having to go back and say, hang on, why did you say this? And then how did they react? Because then they get offended, or and maybe that is partly I'm to blame. Maybe I should have defined certain areas before, but it's, you live and you learn, as it were, and you take each day as it comes. And so that's it really.
No, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for that opening. And you're right, in some families there will be a certain relations that require respect, but the age gap may not be very big, and therefore there's certain boundaries that will have to kick in terms of who is that person to you in your relation. It might be an uncle or an aunt, but they might be similar age, they might be a bit younger than you even. So there's conduct that needs to be recognized. And you're also right. We're always living and we're learning and we're correcting and we're molding and we're enhancing. And there are certain times when conduct is referred to within circumstances. So it's circumstance-led. Situations happen, scenarios take place, and then they need to be dealt with, and then you correct yourself and you think, right, that needs to be done in this way. But whilst you were speaking, and before I come to Sister Masarat and Shabina, who are so kindly waiting, you also reminded me of childhood, my own childhood. And I remember on the weekends, and I've probably mentioned this on the radio before, we always had to have a meat or a chicken-based curry made and waiting for any unexpected guests that might turn up at our house. They may turn up, they may not, but we had to cater for that on a general level. And if there was a knock at the door, and in those days you'd have settees, and settees would have covers that our mums would so well, stitch and put onto the settees. And if the covers were slightly ruffled, or you were lying down, or they were scrunched up, or you're just chilling out on a weekend, and that knock at the door, there's certain things that you knew in terms of behavior and conduct and how to articulate yourself, not just in speech, but in your manners and your behavior and conduct, that you had to get up and start sorting the room out and tidying it up and straightening the sofas and the settees and so on and so forth. Nobody had to sit there and tell you this, but you just knew it. Some things you pick up by observation, other things have to be physically taught to the youth and the children and those around us at times. Shabina, Masarat, what are you thinking? Should I go? Go on, Shabina. You go now. Go on.
Okay. Well, to be honest, I was going to take it back a little bit. When I thought about the topic, articulating, I thought about my own children and can they actually articulate themselves? And I think they can't articulate themselves as well as I want them to. So to do that, I've noticed that quite a bit with my own children. And I'm trying to help them. And in order to help them, I've learned that I need to give them space to speak. So, for example, if I was to ask a question and, give them that time to articulate themselves, give them that space to think about their response and not just rush it. So I thought that's quite important to do with our children, give them time to speak, give them and encouraging them to speak. Because so often we can just be like, okay, be quiet now, don't talk anymore, that's it, no more questions. Often we say that, but I think it's very important to allow them to articulate, allow them to ask questions, and this will help their confidence. Because at the end, we want our children to be confident. We want them to be confident in the society. We want them to articulate themselves, understand their identity, and be able to articulate themselves when they're posed in situations where, they need to, defend their identity or explain, why they wear hijab, explain why they pray, or, have these sort of conversations and be confident in that conversation. So I think that's quite important to give time.
Good point, Shabina. Once again, because as you were speaking there, the key points for me: defend, explain, express, and hopefully less of the defend and more of the explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and why it's more important, and definitely express. And you're absolutely right about the confidence aspect of it as well, and that does get enhanced and it does grow when you give them space, and space means making mistakes as well, and allowing them to make mistakes and coming back to them with a correction without them being scared that my mom or my dad are just going to come down on me like a ton of bricks because of the way that I said that in front of that aunt, or the way I just behaved, or what I just did, or the way I just spoke there at that moment in time. So they need to be corrected, but with love, with attention, and also at the back of your mind as a carer or a guardian or as a parent, knowing that I need to keep an eye on this. Maybe is this behavior just an accident, or is this going to become a habit? Is this going to become their conduct? So we just to keep that balance and to know whether it was a mistake or whether it's something that they're actually enjoying and they like being rude and offensive and obnoxious. So it's recognizing those symptoms. Sorry, Sister Fazilat, you were going to say
So
something?
it's just just going back to what Shabina was saying, giving them time and space, but also something that I've learned, and maybe you guys have as well, that sometimes even ourselves, we're quick to answer, we're quick to respond. And I think teaching our children to take a step back and actually take on board what's being asked of them, or how they're being questioned, or what the situation is, to read the situation, the circumstances, and then give an informed response if you want to, and not just haphazardly. Because quite often what happens is that if they're in a situation, they feel they need to respond straight away, and in those situations they can be quite rude or quite abrupt. If a teacher, for example, asks them about their homework, they might feel the need to just shout and say, I have done it, or I haven't done it, or whatever. Do you see? So I think sometimes it's to have just take a moment to think. And it's quite funny, just us as adults, and it's a silly example, but like, if you get messages, and I'm one of those people that I'll reply straight away. And I remember there was a friend, she'd take her time to reply. And I was thinking, like, if I've asked a question, why is she replying back to me after like a few hours, or maybe the next day? And you learn from other people that you're around, that sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you need to, because when you reply instantly, you may say things that you don't want to say, and later you think, I could have worded that better, or I shouldn't have said that, in the heat of the moment. So having that sabr and giving a cool and collected response, I think, whether it's your behavior, whether it's your speech, or whether it's how you conduct yourself, even your body language, can be controlled in that way. So I just wanted to point that out.
Jazakallah khair. Go ahead, Masud.
I'm glad that you brought up this topic, Naveed, because I'm really struggling with this, with my children, especially the older ones, as they have been, into new environments and new school and everything. And they don't know what to expect in new environment, obviously, because it's something really different. But it was a completely different scenario when they were little. Like, I always thought that, some children are naturally gifted with that charm and confidence and cleverness to, speak up. I'm sure, Shabina, that, some children are like teachers' pet, and, teachers like them, and they speak up at every chance they get. So, but as they grow and, as they enter the teenage phase, I've realized that, we just can't label children as, the confident one and a quiet one. These labels are sometimes bad, and it affects their confidence. So, we have to step in, because if you think, what about those children who are quiet and are not confident? How will they cope in their life in future if we don't step up as parents and, give them confidence, or practice, or sometimes even help them?
There's so much there that's already been discussed already in the few minutes that we've been on air. Subhanallah. And one of the points that I want to come back to before I come to your point, Sarah, what you said, Fazilat, about taking your time to respond. Not only do people delay in responding because they want to think about what to say, depends what the discussion is, whether it's heated or and people want to be careful that they don't sound too rude or too abrupt, or to give a good answer. And there are other times people will take their time because they don't want people to set expectations with them. So whether it's in speech or behavior, somebody wants you to come round and help them do a task. People will probably at times not say, yeah, definitely, just come over tomorrow, I'm free, because they don't want to set that expectation. And they're articulating their speech and behavior and their conduct in a way where they're thinking, no, I don't want to have that expectation that whenever she feels like it or he wants to, they can just turn up at my door, and they should have that expectation that I'm just going to be available for them, which isn't a bad thing. And you're also right, Musarat, in terms of labels, because these things are things that we learn and we enhance on and we expand on as we grow. And labeling is something that we really, really do need to refrain from. We're living in a times at the minute, post-COVID, where labeling is something, at times I think, from my life coaching perspective, I will get clients and I feel that people want to be labeled. And my style of coaching would be, let's avoid the jargon and let's avoid terminology, and let's deal with the root cause of the problem and connect it back to thought and emotion and why we're doing what we're doing and where it's coming from, so we can tackle the issue and correct the issue so you can move forward with your life. So the more we abstain from the concepts of labeling, which is a two-edged sword, because in a way society is sucking us into that, and at times I feel even youth like to be labeled. I remember my eldest wasn't working at his full capacity, and I remember thinking, is he dyslexic? Could he be dyslexic? Shall I check this? And all the symptoms were there. And I had him checked, and alhamdulillah, he wasn't. Alhamdulillah, if he was, we were prepared for that. And he was demoralized. And it was because he thought, I really thought I was. Because as a 15-year-old, to be sat there thinking, what can I label myself with? Rather than just looking at it as a solution that you're looking for in ways of moving forward. Because if, for example, he did have dyslexia, then alhamdulillah, we can cater for these things. And we know of people that have these learning differences, and they learn differently and become doctors and do languages and achieve and progress and go through life in an amazing manner. But however, now we're living at a times where even the youth themselves at times can be thinking, oh, it'd be better to have a label. Because it makes you feel good, or it gives you an answer. It doesn't expect you to think outside of the box or to grow, because growth comes through, and it ties in with what you were saying about children as well, Shabina, that if we shut our children down, you're talking about articulation, can our kids articulate themselves? It's a good rhetorical question, because if we're not going to allow them to speak and allow them to speak at their speed, pace, and level, they're never going to learn how to do it better, quicker, and faster. Or their behavior as well. If they're not going to possibly be rude or offend somebody a little bit or a lot somewhere, you're never going to be correcting something. So if they don't make mistakes, there's nothing to correct. And all of that is part of a development process. Are we doing enough of that as parents? Is it happening enough? Are we even thinking about this? Is maybe another question that we can delve into. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of patience. It definitely takes a lot of patience for us to wait around for them to explain something. That's one thing that I've learned. You do have to have that patience and just wait for them and encourage them to carry on to speak. So I think that's one thing. Yeah. That's the only point I was going to make.
Yeah, that's fine. I think another point is embarrassed. And I think at times parents can fall into that category of they're like, oh, please don't ask because he's going to take so long in explaining that, or she's going to speak in a way that is going to make me cringe as a parent, or I'm sitting at the edge of my seat thinking, oh my God, what is the response that she is going to give or he's going to give to that person for that? Is it too much information, too little information? Is it going to be a formal response, an informal response? But these are things that, would you say, are taught literally, or taught by them watching us and seeing what we do? How does it work?
I think it's taught by watching us.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
It's
say.
definitely taught. I'd say in my, say, classroom environment, I'm just thinking about even just in my class, when the students that take so long to explain something, I definitely don't shut them down. I encourage them, carry on, explain it. And if anybody interrupts or tries to shout out, I correct that. So I would encourage that, and then also encourage how I'm speaking, because that's what they will model. They will learn from how I am speaking. So in that sense, it's definitely from us. Us as parents our children are going to learn from us, how we speak. So it's quite important to do that. I think we have to have a balance as well. There's a balance in a sense. We can sometimes come across very loud and very confident to the point where they are kind of quite a little quiet. They are, more quieter. I feel it's in my reality, I'm quite loud compared to my children, and my children are a little bit quieter. So I'm trying to take a step back, allow them to speak. I've taken that on myself. I think that's important.
Yeah, very true. It's about reflection as a parent. And before I let anybody else come in on that, believe it or not, we're going into a break within the next 20 seconds. So we'll come back to this point about the attention and the modelling. I've made a note of that. And I think we just need to enhance on that a bit more before we move on to the second half of the show. Jazakallah khair to the listeners. Jazakallah khair for you guys joining me today. And we'll be back straight after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Ishaq Qazi from March from Futures. Great listening to Inspire FM. Keep on listening on 105.1 FM.
You don't have to go to Pakistan to enjoy the finest Asian food. Enjoy a great choice of authentic cuisine at Little Lahore Tandoori Restaurant and Takeaway in Dunstable. With mouth-watering chicken, lamb, veg and fish dishes, Chersi Karahi, Nihari, mixed grill, platters and for so much more, the Little Lahore Restaurant also has a separate hall for private parties for up to 50 people at 2 Nicholas Way, LU6 1TD. Or order via Deliveroo, Uber Eats or Just Eat. We also provide external catering. For more information, call 01582 353 983. That's Little Lahore for the finest Pakistani cuisine.
Attention all electricians, builders and DIY enthusiasts. Capital Electrical Wholesalers are now open in Luton. It's a fully stocked branch with experienced staff on hand to help with all your electrical needs. With branches also in Greenford, Tottenham, Richmond and Ashton. Capital Electrical Wholesalers only stock the biggest names, including JCC, Saxby, Knightsbridge, Hamilton, MK, Wilex, Hager, Aco Smoke Alarms and many more. That's Capital Electrical at Unit M, Kingsway Industrial Estate. Call 01582 801122.
For expert legal advice and support, talk with Luton's leading solicitors, Hannah Solicitors. We specialise in conveyancing, wills and probate, family law, immigration and personal injury, legal matters that matter to you. Our experienced legal team are here to help you through every step of the way. Call 01582 329 069. That's 01582 329 069 or click on hannahsolicitors.co.uk. Hannah Solicitors, professional advice with a tailored approach.
None of you will enter paradise unless you have faith, and none of you will truly have faith unless you love each other. Reported by Tirmidhi and Muslim.
Biscard Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton, stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscard Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our Stop Smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscard Pharmacy, 157A Biscard Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Losing a loved one, especially a mother or a father, could mean losing access to safety, education and shelter. We here at Crisis Aid believe that children in the world deserve a better chance at life. Your small donation can influence a big change. Donate today. www.crisisaid.org.uk/orphan fund or call our donations line 0333 305 5000.
Oh, Hillary, I was going to use newspaper display advertising.
But
it costs £10 per inch.
And that's too expensive.
Oh, indeed it is. I want to sell a 10-foot ladder.
Oh, Roger, invest in an ear-catching advertising campaign on this radio station instead. It's a great way to tell people about your products and service.
For details, click on inspirefm.org, then advertise. From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the second half of this week's parenting show live on Inspire 105.1 FM. Your host today is myself, Sister Naveed, and joining me for today's show are Sister Fazilat, Shabina and Nusrat. I just wanted to remind the listeners that you're free to contribute to today's show with any questions, comments, any suggestions on 07779481822. We should be live on Facebook as well, so feel free to share the link. Give us any feedback on Facebook as well, inshallah. Just before we went into break, we were discussing the topic of articulation of speech and behavior. And Shabina, you were speaking about attention and to the children and modeling ourselves in terms of our conduct and behavior and speech and so on and so forth. We were going to carry on with this point. Sister Masara, I believe you had something that you wanted to add on that point.
Yeah, something to add on to what Sabina said earlier. Of course, there's no excuse for bad behavior or using, bad language or bad manners. But, we as parents of especially teenage children, we need to keep in our minds about their age and, if they're teenagers, their hormones are always fluctuating. And, this causes their behavior to be a certain way. So one moment they might be fine and another moment they might be snappy or depressed or complaining. But in these situations, they may either shut down out of fear or, sometimes if they make any mistakes, they may not be able to, convey their feelings or, the speech might be a bit weird to explain. Yeah. But we as parents, we need to assure them that no matter what, don't be hasty while speaking or expressing your emotions, Don't be quick to react. Like, of course, we are humans and we react erratically sometimes. But then we need to train ourselves to behave in a certain way, especially as a Muslim, how we are expected to behave. Because our behavior and speech are the door to our hearts and minds. So I think that matters a lot. And especially for me as a mom to teenage boys, I can tell you that a lot of times children get in trouble because they cannot convey the message and their feelings to their teachers or, others in a certain way.
Yeah. And you're right, especially when children go from, as you said at the beginning of the show, from one environment into another environment. It could be a very densely populated environment of one type of group of people or background. And when you're removed from that and put into another scenario or situation, and we have to also take a step back as parents, carers, guardians, and think and reflect, how was I in environments when I didn't know much? How shy was I? How timid was I? How silent and mute was I? Or how abrasive was I as a personality? How outspoken was I? How sharp was I? How, maybe I came across rude to other people, although it was my, shyness that was kicking in, or my anxiety that was kicking in. Because when we start to get erratic and emotional and sensitive and nervous is the word I'm looking for, I think, in an environment, the reaction that creates within all of us is very different. Some people talk too much, some talk too little, some start to talk gibberish and say too much, convey too much, and they think, oh my God, why did I say that? That wasn't to be discussed with other people. So we, even as adults, we can reflect and look back and think, well, we're in our 30s now, or 40s now, we're our parents now, and we think we're really clever. We think we're really amazing, and we can have the shortness of our attitude towards our children because we expect them to have had custom made for us. But we weren't custom made for our parents. And you are polished through life and through the experiences and exposures of life. But when we're talking about the attention and the modeling, there is a connection back to a belief and to a viewpoint that is necessary and important. But before we move on to that, is there anybody else that's got any thoughts that you want to share?
Just that I think, going back to what Shabina was saying, that sometimes we're embarrassed about how our kids might behave or speak. But the other side is sometimes it's easier to leave children at home, for example, and not take them to family gatherings, not because we're embarrassed, but it's just convenient. Just leave it at home and go and deal with we'll deal with that. And I've done it many times, mom would say, leave them at home, it's fine, we'll come back. But then you realize as they get older, if they've never been put in a situation, they won't know how to behave. If they've never experienced, for example, a death, they won't know how to give their condolences or meet people
and behave in that setting.
And to show empathy and concern. And if and then you expect them when they're in their 20s to go and deal with situations like that, for example, they won't know. And it's not their fault, it's our fault as parents. Or even things like weddings, sometimes just the husband and wife might go, and that might be the case because they've been invited. That's how many, but sometimes more people are invited and we still choose not to take them. We think there's no need, there's too much hassle, with our children. And it could be young toddlers, and it could be adults, it could be teenagers. I think it applies to all, that until we experience that situation, even ourselves, we won't know how to read that situation and how to conduct ourselves in that. So if we're put in a new situation as adults, we get a bit nervous or a bit anxious on, okay, how do I portray myself, or how do I deal with this situation? It could be like work, going to a new job, for example, not knowing what's expected. So I think it's just giving them that opportunity, that space to experience life and make their mistakes. So what if they do something that's embarrassing, but they'll learn not to do it the next time, inshallah. I think that's it, really.
And I think there is an element of taking responsibility as parents, carers, or guardians of children and youth, and a reflection process that needs to happen at times in terms of what was my contribution towards this. Just picking on what you were saying, Shabina, that sometimes you've had a reflection process, of course, probably thinking when you're with your children that maybe I talk too much and I don't give them the opportunity to speak, or I'm a loud personality, and actually my children aren't like me, and to realize that actually their personality or character might be a bit more timid, or have they become like this because of the way that I am? So what are the changes that I need to make? What is the tweaking that I need to do to allow my children's growth to happen as a character or a personality, or in their articulation of speech and putting sentences together, learning, actually practicing the formal speech in a formal environment, actually practicing or bringing into practice different types of informal environments, and how to relax, or how far to be informal, to what extent, to what level, and what kind and what type, and then reviewing that, because it literally is a process of discussion. Everything requires thought, everything requires a discussion, so that you can consolidate ideas. And that consolidation process, and you touched upon it at the beginning, Fazilat, where you talked about is connecting it back to the purpose of our life, or is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to be pleased with me? Is it okay for me to behave like this? Is it okay for me to take this situation as far as I want to take it? Is this conduct going to be the correct way of dealing with this? Is this hype from society? Is this hype from social media? What does it mean to look cool? What does it mean to have cool speech? To what level do I have cool speech? To what level do I take whatever item of clothing might be in fashion? Can I afford it? Can we afford more than a can of baked beans for a family of 5 and a slice of toast, that we have to ration how many slices and how much beans are put on top of that within our families? So what am I aiming for? what am I wanting in life, and to what extent am I going to get this? And that consolidates in a way the modeling aspect, isn't it? As you were saying, Shabina. I mean, alhamdulillah, it's refreshing to hear, from you from a teacher perspective, that it's nice to know that there are teachers out there that give time to children in their classrooms, even if they take longer to explain, and to give them that level of importance, because it's very easy for in a group setting for any adult to just quickly point out, and we can call them teachers' pets, maybe they might be, or it might be, I'll go to that child because that child will explain it quicker. This one's just going to take 20 minutes, just this, I haven't got the time. And to give that attention so those children can develop and grow as characters and personalities. Ultimately, we want to create leadership quality within the youth. We talk about this a lot on our parenting show, don't we? But that leadership quality needs to be connected back with confidence, which needs to be connected back to the purpose of our life. And then as parents or guardians or carers, we also need to know, why is it important to have this conversation today about articulation and conduct and behavior and speech? They all connect back. Go ahead.
I think times have changed, and I feel children spend more time at school, and then after they come back home, they're on screens and watching YouTube or whatever. So they pick up trends and slang language and all that. So it has become normal for them to use that language even while speaking to their teachers or in written language sometimes. And you wonder, like, where has the language gone? So when situations arise, when they need to be formal or articulate, it's going to be hard for them. So we as parents, in this day and age, sometimes we have to spoon feed them and practice with them what kind of language to use.
Yeah. Because that might not exist in the home environment, because we're at home, we're relaxed, and we're forgetting that the social media is having it's an informal platform. On that platform, there will be platforms that will be there for educational purposes, but the majority of what our youth will be watching and what will be feeding into their subconscious mind is derogatory language, abusive language, or informal language. And if that's not corrected and that's not limited in different settings, as you were saying, Shabina, to speak correctly, and that's in a school environment where you are setting the standard of speech, and two, there's a correction of speech taking place. So the onus is on different categories of society and different elements of society, and bringing that together in that sense and in that manner. Another point that I wanted to move on to, unless somebody had something that you wanted to add or say in regards to any of what we've discussed so far, types of bullying and scaremongering and scare tactics, the fear element. The fear element of being shown up, the fear element of looking stupid, the fear element of looking like the loser, the fear element of backing down and being the one that backs down. Or the reversal could be the fact that you're picked on because you're a timid, shy, or a quieter personality, or you're a different skin color, or you're a different background. The types of bullying and scaremongering can vary from individuals to politicians to a majority opinion to the media, for different people from different backgrounds. One of you touched upon the hijab, and just the fact that when we step outside, or when our young women step outside, the confidence with which we step outside, or when we look for somewhere to pray and we do our prayer, yes, we have to make sure it's a safe place and a safe environment to a certain degree, but the confidence level within our character comes from somewhere further and deeper. It's a thought process that leads that and pushes that, and it's whatever is the majority within the individual that will be enhanced, if you understand what I mean. Is anybody following me on this? What are your thoughts on that?
I lost you a little bit.
Bullying. How do we deal with the bullying element? How do we, whether the child is the bully or whether the child is bullied in society, picked on because of their timidness or their shyness? How do they overcome that? How do they deal with that? The scaremongering, the fear tactics.
I think it's about building their confidence, isn't it? And again, and trying to bring them out their shell, not to be to show confidence, because they do get picked on because they're shy or timid, and maybe they portray themselves as being weak. And being shy is not a negative thing, but it's showing confidence where it needs to be shown. And we need to teach our children how to do that. You can be shy and confident.
Silently confident.
Yeah, at the same time. So you can stand your ground. And I think it's just instilling that we're trying to build that in our children. It's not something that will happen overnight. Different personalities are, different children have different personalities. So it's just about working with them and knowing what their fears are. Maybe they feel that they're maybe small, for example, and they feel they're not strong enough physically to stand up to a bully. But sometimes it's again how we speak. Whereas that person who's a bigger child, for example, who's the bully, may actually have more insecurities than the smaller one. It's not always about size. So I think it's just building personalities. But also wanted to address that sometimes even as adults or whether it's teenagers or young children, I think all ages, sometimes you're provoked into a confrontation, and you have to learn how to read that situation and walk away from it. And again, it's going back to how we articulate ourselves in terms of that we recognize what's happening and say that I'm not being a part of this. And that's something that requires confidence and awareness of the situation. And it goes back to what we originally sort of talked about, how not reacting straight away. I know I came across a situation, or I know of somebody who came across a situation where another person was taunting them, wanted a reaction from them, so they could, create a negative persona about that person, for example, or say that this is how they behave, or this is how they were creating a situation. And alhamdulillah, the other person on the receiving end realized what was happening, that kind of like a trap was being set, if you like. And they just said, I'm not part of this. I don't want to, I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to allow that to happen, and walked away. And sometimes, you think that it's the weaker person that walks away. It's not. I think it takes a lot more courage to stay silent and move, remove yourself from that situation than to answer back. And, if you look at our youth, I think you mentioned at the beginning where a young teenager was killed in Luton a week or so ago, just starting college, and there's been other stabbings around the town. I think what happens is, in confrontations, we feel obliged to respond straight away. We feel that it's an issue of respect, in these gangs and in this youth culture that we have to, otherwise we're going to look weak. But again, I think we have to change that mindset where it's not. You walking away it takes a lot more than standing there and confronting them, and then having the situations that we have, where unfortunately the young are being killed by the same, they're similar, youth at their age. So I think it's just, knowing that, and this goes back to, and I see it, I don't know, like I see it in my children, for example, when they're growing up, kids fight, they have arguments, and how dare she say that, or how dare he do this, and that they have to feel that they have to get vindication or revenge, straight away. And I always give the example of, where Prophet ﷺ used to walk past, and that lady used to throw rubbish on them, and they used to just walk away and get themselves cleaned, and it's happened so often. And then when the rubbish wasn't thrown, Prophet ﷺ went and inquired about that woman. And I always say to my children that, who are you? If you feel hard done by, or if you feel insulted, or he was a prophet, best of mankind, and he had rubbish thrown on him, and he didn't retaliate. And we have to learn from that you have to have sabr. There's a better thing at the end of it. And that lady became a Muslim. So, you know, sometimes we're in situations where we feel that, you know, we're being attacked. Sometimes it is better to show the good character, what Allah wants us to show. So we can show what Islam is about. Don't know.
No, that's bang on. And even the mocking aspect here, it goes back to what you said about the stronger character. To stay, to walk away takes more strength than to stay there and to try and show off this physical strength, where the pressure is on by crowds, your like-minded cultures, societies, community, social media, whatever it may be, to get caught up in that atmosphere and that environment to respond to that is easier. But if we look to the example of Muhammad ﷺ and what made him behave the way that he did, it was his thinking. So there was strength in his understanding and his conviction about what is worth sitting and disputing and what is worth walking away from. And it's recognizing scenarios and situations. And it might be the fact that there might be one scenario that your child gets caught up in. And you think, okay, you've got caught up in that, so let's dissect what happened and why are we behaving like this? Why are we speaking like this? Where has this come from? And to connect the thinking process back to the root. And if the root is Islam for us, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about conduct and behavior and speech? Then if we make that connection by Quran and Sunnah and Hadith and Ayat, and examples, as you gave of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba, and how they conducted themselves and behaved, and how they spoke to those that spoke badly to them, and how that didn't humiliate them. They didn't feel humiliated, but they felt raised in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is who we're trying to please, your ego or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it the society and the community or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So when you're mocked by society, as was our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and people like Bilal radiallahu anhu and Sumayya radiallahu anha, when you're called weak or a weasel or a wimp or whatever other derogatory terms, it means nothing to you. It bounces right off you. And that's what being silently confident is all about, which is the point, you know, that you began your point there with Fazilat. And that is something that every single youth can have. So when they have an argument or a discussion, or even on a political level, that they want to portray, they want to explain, they've thought about it, they've connected it back, they've thought about what setting do I want to have this discussion in, and what do I not want to have it in, where do I want to spend my time discussing this, and how will I conduct myself, how would I compose myself, am I going to get, are they going to get under my skin, is it going to affect me or not? And if something has affected my confidence, why has it, and what is weakening me? And then the parents or the guardians or the carers need to be there, who need to be on the same path of the Quran and Sunnah to be able to make those connectives.
Also,
sorry, go on very quickly.
No, I was going to say, that that doesn't mean to say we put up with abuse or we put up with bullying or we put up with, discrimination against us. That's not the message that I think it's important to say. That's not what we're trying to say. I think it's about balancing it and dealing with the situation in the correct manner. So you can, we won't, you don't tolerate abuse or those things, but it's about dealing with the situation correctly. Sometimes shouting and screaming isn't the right answer. Sometimes it's different avenues and ways of dealing with certain situations. Just wanted to add that because I didn't want to think, the listeners to think that, you just sit there and accept all and not do anything.
Yeah. It's each scenario and situation is very individual. And it's assessing that, and that's where our responsibility comes in. Sorry, Masara, do you want to quickly add something before we round up for today's show?
The point, I wanted to say is mostly people in society, they are followers. There are very few who would think out of the box. So even in situations where, things should be correct, like the ayah come to my mind, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, you should be speaking about the haqq. But since the society doesn't follow that haqq, your child might be pressurized, not to speak about it. So as parents, we need to, support them and build up the confidence about what is right and speak about it.
Absolutely. And that comes through discussion with thought, with connecting back. And so the rapport between the parent and the child, whether it's silent confidence or whether it's actually speaking up and having the articulation of speech in a formal environment, and getting your point across in the correct manner with the correct people, and really understanding your platform and where you are and what you want to say and how you want to say it. I'm going to just finish with a saying of Al-Ghazali. And Al-Ghazali, Allah be pleased with him, said that human beings consist of two forms. One form is the behavior and the other is the character. He said behavior is your physical form, the outer side of you, and the character is your spiritual form, is influenced by your spiritual form, and that's your thoughts, your opinions, your views, and your connection back to Quran and Sunnah and so forth. Obviously was his connection that he was making there. He said Islamic ethics the Islamic ethics from Ghazali's point of view is that it is rooted in the soul and manifests itself through human actions. And the character in itself is acquired through practice and training. So we can't expect our children to all of a sudden wake up, as we said in the beginning of the show as well, to be the perfect human beings and to be molded into this mold that we want them to have and to be a part of. But rather it's going to take time, and it's going to be something that requires effort, and it requires a character building and a training process as well from them, inshallah.
Assalamu
I just want to
alaikum.
say
In Luton and its surrounding areas, it is now time for Salat al-Isha.
लुटन और इसके मसाफात में नमाज इशा का वक्त हुआ चाहता है।